Welcome to this series of conversations with Smart Cities Council and our Digital Twin Maturity Task Force. In 2021, after 2 years of consultation with government and industry, Smart Cities Council released a draft digital twin blueprint. The goal was to catalyse a thriving digital twin marketplace in the Australia and New Zealand regions and activate data and create value for decision makers in the natural and built environments. To respond to a more dynamic and uncertain world and take advantage of tomorrow's opportunities, we wanted to rethink the way that our built and natural environments are planned, built, managed, and how services are delivered, which is only possible if we embrace new technologies, which we'll cover in a little bit, such as digital twins. These need to allow for integrated, productive, sustainable, physical, and natural asset stewardship with the help of data and data insights. This blueprint was put together and hosted in an online environment with links to edit the document. It was made freely available to stakeholders at request. It wasn't a strategy, rather a resource that could be used that we aimed to use to inform policy related activities by governments of all levels across the region, and hopefully the work of our fellow industry professionals and industry bodies as well. The blueprint really provided a series of draft recommendations based on engagement with the government, industry, academia, relating to digital twin capability development, leadership, governance standards, use cases, and some research priorities as well. So what are we doing here today? 2 years on, we want to use this series and our task force's brilliant minds to bring together all sectors across the natural and built environments to review that document, that blueprint. We want to have a look at digital twin maturity and the progress that's been made since the publication of the blueprint so that we can outline the next steps and where action is needed. To lead these discussions, we have Kerry Niven, Chair of our Digital Twin Maturity Task Force and the Digital Practice Lead for Oricon New Zealand. Kerry is a passionate digital professional with a background in geospatial tech and over 20 years of international experience in engineering and construction project delivery, as well as enterprise digital collaboration, platform design, and organizational strategy and transformation. Kerry, I will let you give a quick introduction to your work with Oricon.
Hi, thanks, Robin. Thanks for starting the conversation. I guess in my role as a digital lead for New Zealand for Oricon, as you said, my responsibilities are pretty broad, and a lot of it is focused around working with clients and working across industry and taking a look not just at how we are changing inside Oricon and what we need to be thinking about to become even more relevant in the future, but similarly, how are our clients and our partners doing the same? And what can we learn from each other? I think that's probably the most interesting part of my role, is having the opportunity to look out across industry, not just in the design part of the sector, but also taking a look into construction and into asset ownership as well. So what are the problems and the challenges and the opportunities that each part of those sectors are facing? So yeah, it's pretty broad, and the digital twin component has been a really big part of the conversation, and even more so over the last few years, is more and more we're just starting to see people digitising their assets, and by virtue of that creating an awful lot of data and the opportunity that creates for gathering insights to make better decisions.
So probably a good segue there. I thought it might be a good place to start by discussing where we're at as a sector. So in Australia and Aotearoa, there are pockets of applications that we're seeing presented at events like Digital Built World Summit and our upcoming Smart Cities Weeks. But from an implementation perspective, where do you think we're at?
So we've had digital twin summits in some shape or form, as you mentioned, and conversations about digital twin for probably the last at least 4 years, I would say. And what I do still find interesting is when we hear people talk about digital twin, that quite often people will say, well, we don't need to define a twin because, we're past that now. But then they go on to define a twin. And so I think, to me, that says that there's still a little bit of validation that's happening. And I think that comes about because the digital twin quite often is in the eye of the beholder. So if it's built for a specific purpose, then that purpose will define its actual structure and what it does and how it works and the value that it creates. So I think that's what we're seeing is a huge amount of activity at all different scales across different industries for different purposes. And I think that's really interesting in itself, because where the conversation started to a degree was around a national digital twin, certainly in New Zealand. What's the potential? And actually what we've seen is industry has spoken in a way by building its own twins. And I think that's great. So from an implementation perspective, there's a lot going on.
Good. We can see projects that have then expanded into organization-wide adoption, but certainly a lot of activity. And I'm curious, as we go through this process of conversations and pulling people from different sectors to see how we can pull everyone together. We're talking a lot about digital twins. We've been talking about them for a long time. Do you think that we're talking enough about foundational layers, the unsexy, boring things like data standards and formats and governance and lifecycle management?
Most of those things are my favourite topics, so I may be biased, but I
That's
think
what we hear, right?
well, look, maturity, soon as that is what we're focusing on. It, in some ways, is about taking ownership, and it's the realization that maybe you don't just buy a twin off the shelf. You actually have an obligation to uplift your maturity so that you are able to ask for the right things and to know when you're maybe not being sold the right thing for you. And also understanding, to get into the nitty gritty, I guess, a little bit more, is we're really starting to see people take ownership of their data, to say, actually, it's really important to us that we understand what data we need. We think quite carefully about how we hold it and structure it and who gets access to it and how we're maintaining it, and really how we classify and categorize our data. And I think that's one of the big shifts that we're seeing as people become more mature. The early tendency to buy something off the shelf or to build a partnership with a vendor or another partner who can provide that maturity, we're starting to see people shift into ownership. And I think that's good, because that does mean that almost by definition, you have to embrace the unsexy stuff around what is your strategy, and is your data supporting your strategy, and do we
Exactly.
have the capability to sustain it? So
Yeah.
I think that's a good
Skills,
thing.
exactly. In your opinion, why is it important to measure maturity?
Look, I think you actually also have to ask, what is a measure of maturity? What does it look like? And all of the use cases, well, not all of them, but most of them, they measure maturity and value and outcome. So it's not just okay, so we've, to look at the stages of a digital twin in terms of, is it a data twin, is it a simulation twin, that traditional maturity index. It's more around, do we have the right information to be able to answer the questions or solve the problems that we're trying to solve? And is that providing value to us as an organisation as, we look to achieve our outcomes? And so I think it's not the new measure of maturity necessarily in terms of a definition, but that's what we're starting to see, is people actually really being focused on the outcomes that the twin can provide. And as the organisation becomes more mature in its thinking, we are starting also to see the transition around the function and structure of the twin. So a real shift away from, okay, we've got past the data capture stage. We have our master data management strategy in place, or that is done. We're now either at the stage of automation. So can we start to automate data inputs and outputs and integrations and the ability to visualize and analyze and all those sorts of things, but sometimes also into the semi-autonomous twins. So starting to look at how AI and other technology can be embraced within the twin. And you can't do that without a pretty mature outlook on value.
Let's maybe just touch on that AI piece quickly. What are your thoughts on, as a topic, is it the new digital twin as a buzzword? Are we neglecting other elements, machine learning?
I think it's a really important conversation to have with practitioners and people who are actually implementing AI, because I get the distinct impression that the Gartner hype curve is alive and well in this case. So just like it was with digital twins when they were the shiny thing, that everybody wanted to buy off the shelf several years ago now. We're
Yeah.
definitely in that space with AI at the moment. It's great to have the conversation and to recognise the potential, or maybe in some cases just to cling on to the idea of potential, and that's okay, depending where you are in the curve. But when you think about AI, it's a language model at the in most instances, and what does a language model rely on? Repositories of data. So if your data foundation is not solid, then you'll come out with some questionable answers. And if you look at ChatGPT as just the most basic example of AI, and probably the one that people are most familiar with, is you've still got the obligation to validate the answers that it gives you, and you don't know the data sources necessarily. But I think there's a really strong connection between digital twin and AI. But what that connection becomes will be determined really by maturity and understanding of data and the ability to critically assess the answers that it's giving you and to bring it all together.
Spot on. I agree. Absolutely. And look, that is a good segue then to talk about what we're going to do. As a task force, as a cohort, we want to have a series of conversations with practitioners. We want to talk to people that can give their definition of functional outcomes in the context of digital twin maturity, how we shift from solutions to foundational capabilities and share learnings across work from design and delivery. We want to outline a measurement of maturity, to your point. We want to look at metrics, we want to look at solutions, look at validation models for twin maturity, typologies, geospatial challenges, and the key, as you've mentioned, what organizations would find useful. So that why are we implementing in the first place? So we want to bring people together over the next few months and then re-release the blueprint. But who needs to be at the table when we're discussing digital twins? So from a public sector, private sector perspective, as well as other professional bodies, who do you think needs to be jumping in?
Well, I think to build up the most complete picture, the answer would be everyone. The blueprint did a really good job of baselining where we were at the time that it was written. There's a lot of case studies that were brought into it. There's a lot of work done to surface, examples of great work, and including learnings from overseas. So what was happening in the UK, for example, and that's really important. But this conversation that we can have now is, okay, so what did we think then? Where are we now? And what's different? What's changed? What's the opportunity? What have we learnt? There's a huge amount. I'm not saying it's just a retrospective, but quite often to go forward, you need to take a step back. So I'd love to speak to people, to practitioners, who are out there doing it, who are into maybe their second iteration of twin design for one organisation or more organisations. What have they taken from one to another? What have they learnt? It's still really important to have the conversation about aggregation, I think. So that is, at the moment, it's great if one asset owner has their own version of a twin and another has their own version. But what's the potential to bring them together in cases where that potential exists? What's important? What could be the benefit? And then again, also, I think we're seeing a lot of policy and strategy coming out in Australia, particularly regarding the common data model and the shift towards data-driven common data environments, as a component of a twin. I think that's a really important perspective. What does government strategy look like? So, yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to cast the net wide. And as with everything, there will be people who are brand new to this, and they've got just as much of an important perspective as people who've been doing it for a while.
If you would like to get involved in this series of conversations or submit a question, send an email across to engagement@Smart Cities Council, or look out for Kerry or myself on LinkedIn, and catch us at some upcoming events that we'll publish in the show notes.